Hello, my friends. Hey, this is Rob Rosa. Hopefully, your favorite real estate broker. And yes, I am offering you open, truthful, useful, fun, entertaining information. And today it's going to be a little bit, just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit more serious, because we're going to be talking about real estate investors, right? And who doesn't love talking about real estate investing? So, one of the things that we're mainly going to discuss today, and of course, I want you to feel free, feel comfortable to ask as many questions as you want, is we're going to talk about a 1031 exchange. Now, a 1031 exchange is also known as a like kind exchange. And this is something, it's a tax deferred. Hey, June, hey, Jimmy, feel free to put down as many questions as you want. It's a tax deferred, not tax avoidance, because you have to pay your taxes sooner or later. But a tax deferred transaction that allows real estate investors to sell a property and reinvest the proceeds in another property without paying capital gain taxes on that particular sale. Okay, so that's what we're going to go over. We're going to go over an overview of it. We're going to talk about some of the benefits of 1031 exchanges. We're going to talk about the types of 1031 exchanges. We're going to review some of the 1031 exchange rules and regulations and the tips for finding some of these replacement properties, how we can make that happen when it comes to a 1031 exchange, and some of the risks and challenges that go along with it. And so these are, again, we're really talking about being able to help out a real estate investor. And this takes someone like myself who has that knowledge, who has that experience, who has that expertise. Right? So a 1031 exchange, the investor, right, they must identify and purchase a like kind. So that's the point. Like kind property within a specified time frame, usually 45 days, right? Not usually, but they must do it within 45 days. And then complete the purchase of the replacement property within 180 days of the sale of the original property. Now, the value of that replacement property must be equal to or greater than the value of the relinquished property to fully defer the capital gains taxes. So you see, this is a tool that basically has been in place since 1921. Hey, Blair, David, Franklin, so thank you so much for joining us. We're talking about 1031 exchanges. Now, prior to the creation of the 1031 exchanges, investors were required to pay the capital gains taxes on the sale of their property. Right? And usually what this could do is significantly reduce their profits and limit the ability to reinvest in other properties. Now, I've had some people that have come to me kind of during or after the process and said, hey, Rob, I'm thinking about doing a 1031 exchange. But I come back to them and I say, well, what's the main reason that you're selling your property? Because if the main reason to sell this, let's just say it was a commercial mixed use property. Well, you don't want to be in the business of dealing with tenants anymore. You don't want to be in the business of managing properties anymore. So if that's the case, then it might not make sense for you to be dealing, right, with a 1031 exchange, right? So that's some of the ways in which we look at it. Remember, the 1031 exchange allows real estate investors, and please put any questions you have, Tommy, Edith, Jose, allows real estate investors to defer taxes and reinvest the proceeds into other properties. So that way you can increase your purchasing power and potential for long-term gains. Okay? The 1031 exchange, when it comes to real estate investing, is really important for investors who want to sell properties with high levels of appreciated value. You see, maybe over all these years, the value has gone up, and then they want to reinvest those proceeds with other income generating properties, like kind. I don't like when people do that, but I'm going to do it. Like kind properties. Okay? Reinvest them into other properties without incurring a significant tax liability at that moment. You are deferring taxes, right? You can maximize your returns. It's easier for you to possibly, most likely, build wealth over time. Okay? So let's talk about some of the benefits of a 1031 exchange. And please, if you like what you're hearing, if you have questions, George, Patty, Alexander, please make sure you put them in the comments. I'd love to be able to answer as many questions as possible. So one of the main benefits is tax deferral. I mean, wouldn't you rather pay taxes another day rather than today? So that's one of the main benefits of a 1031 exchange. By reinvesting those proceeds from the sale of a property into another like-kind property, the investor can defer paying capital gains taxes on the sale. Now, this can significantly increase the investor's purchasing power and allow them to reinvest more money, into another property. So that's number one. Number two, there's always got to be a number two. Come on. Increased cash flow. Alfonso, John, Steve B, Bo, thank you so much for joining us. So by deferring taxes through a 1031 exchange, the investor can reinvest the entire amount of the sale proceeds into another property, right? And what this does is this helps to increase the investor's cash flow because they're using the additional funds to make improvements to the property or maybe pay down debt or invest in other income generating assets. So this does give you increased cash flow. But like I said, if you're one of those people that said, well, you know what, I just want to get out of this game. I want my money. I don't want to have to deal with this. Then you have to realize you are buying another property that does have to be managed just like the last one. Okay. Number three, my friends, is the wonderful world of increased returns. Come on, who doesn't love increased returns? Chris, Turtle Cam, Edis, Zion, thank you so much for joining us. So we're talking about 1031 exchanges. We talked about the benefits. We're talking about the 4 benefits. Right now we are on the 3rd benefit, which is potential for increased returns. So by reinvesting the proceeds from the sale of a property into another property, the investor can potentially increase their returns over time. This is because the new property may appreciate in value. We definitely hope that. It may generate higher rental income. We definitely would like that. Or there might be other benefits that increases the investor's overall return on investment. And if you're into real estate, if you're into investing, you know that return on investment is of utmost importance. Hey, Brianna, Wayne, Kelly, Robert, Paul, Cornelia, thank you so much for joining us. So that's number 3 as far as the benefits of 1031 exchanges. Now, number 4 is diversification, portfolio diversification. Who doesn't like the sound of that? A 1031 exchange can be used as a tool for portfolio diversification by selling a property in one location and then reinvesting the proceeds into a property into another location. The investor can diversify their portfolio and reduce their exposure to local economic fluctuations and other risks associated with a single property, because now you have a few different properties in different places most likely. Okay, and so that is the 4th one. So we have number 1, tax deferral. We have number 2, increased cash flow. Number 3, increased returns. And number 4, diversify. So overall, a 1031 exchange is a very, very valuable tool for real estate investors looking to defer taxes. right? Increase cash flow, potentially increase their returns over time. It allows investors, real estate investors, to maximize their purchasing power and reinvest the proceeds from the sale of a property into another income generating property. Okay. Now, my friends, there are three main types of 1031 exchanges. I know this is exciting to you. You're probably just, as excited as I am to go through this, because these are opportunities for you in the real estate field. So if you said to yourself, you know what, someday I want to be a real estate investor, I want to learn how to get the best return on my investment, then this 1031 exchange is definitely something that you would want to be able to learn, and I can help you with it every step of the way. So the first one is called the simultaneous exchange. Okay, that's the first one. Now, a simultaneous exchange occurs when the sale of the original property and the purchase of the replacement property occur on the same day. Everything's done together. This type of exchange is rare because it can be difficult, especially in today's world, to find a replacement property that meets the investor's needs and is available for purchase on the same day as the sale of the original property. Right. So, I've actually had some issues before where a gentleman said, well, we're going to buy your property the same day we sell this property in Rhode Island. And here we are in Connecticut. And we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And actually the whole transaction fell apart because we weren't so sure that they were being 100% honest. That property in Rhode Island was under deposit with them, but it didn't end up going through. So if you have questions, if you like some of the information you're hearing, of course, likes and shares are always welcome, and I definitely appreciate it. All you got to do is go click, 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 click. All right. So number one type of exchange, 1031 exchange, is the simultaneous exchange. That's what we talked about just now. Now, the second kind of 1031 exchange is a delayed exchange. And hey, Lily, Tina, Crystal, thank you so much for joining us. Becky, appreciate it. Okay, so what is a delayed exchange? A delayed exchange is the most common type of 1031 exchange. Okay, and this occurs when the sale of the original property takes place first. Right? The sale of the original property takes place first. And then the replacement property is purchased within 180 days. This is the one that we see happen most often in my experience. Okay? The investor, meaning you're the investor, you have 45 days after the sale of the original property to identify up to 3 potential replacement properties. So you might sell a rental property and you have up to 180 days to find a suitable replacement property. Simple and easy. Not that hard. We help people do it all the time. It's definitely something that you would be able to start working on if you wanted to be a real estate investor and be able to save money on deferring taxes and come up with a higher return on your investment. Now, the third one is called a reverse exchange. A reverse exchange occurs when the investor acquires the replacement property before selling the original property. That one's pretty interesting. A reverse exchange. Let me say that again. When the investor, meaning yourself, you find a new replacement property before you sell your original one. Then you have to use what's called a qualified intermediary to hold the title to the new property until the original property is sold. This type of exchange is more complex, right? I've seen it happen a couple of times, and it requires a lot of planning, careful planning, coordination, right? And you have to really be able to have a good intermediary that you are on the same page with and that you both understand your goals and what you're looking to do. So really, when it comes down to it, I like the delayed exchange. Of course, simultaneous exchange is awesome because everything happens on the same day. Delayed gives you a little bit of time because you basically have up to 45 days to identify 3 potential properties, and then you purchase the new property within 180 days, which is about 6 months, which is usually not the hardest thing in the world to do. Okay? Now, let's talk about some of the rules and regulations, because there's kind of a lot here, and it's not like you have to remember everything here today. You're not getting tested, right? But this is to give you some ideas of all the 1031 real estate exchange rules and regulations. And if you were to do something like this, we would be able to, like we talked about, get you in touch with an intermediary that's going to be able to help the real estate agent like myself, the lender and the investor and the attorney, such to be able to get everything together. Okay, and we have to all kind of pretty much understand these rules so that we can successfully complete a 1031 exchange and help you avoid potential tax consequences. You see, that's a really big, important part about this whole thing, is avoiding tax consequences. Okay, so with that in mind, the first thing is the deadline that I have on my list of rules and regulations. So to complete the 1031 deadline, what did we say? The investor must identify potential replacement properties, at least 3 of them, right, within 45 days of the original property, of the sale of the original property. And then close on the purchase of the replacement property within 180 days. Isn't this fun stuff? Hey, S. Hudson, Henry Romero, Mike Flanagan, James Barnhart, thank you so much for joining us, my friends. Right now, we're kind of going through the rules and regulations of 1031 exchanges. Okay, let's talk about like-kind property requirements. Well, what does that mean, Rob? Like-kind? This means that the properties must be of the same nature or character. They don't have to be identical, because we know that that's almost impossible, right? But let's say you're going to sell a 20-unit residential apartment building here in the central Connecticut, and you think that you're going to do a 1031 with a beautiful waterfront condo down in West Palm Beach, Florida. Well, most likely the attorney, the accountant, they're going to tell you, listen, this will probably not fly with the wonderful world of the tax collectors in the United States, and that this will not work for a 1031 exchange. So it has to be of a like kind, okay? Not going to have to be identical, but it has to be close. So an investor, they could exchange a rental property for another rental property, or maybe vacant land for a commercial property. But once again, you're not going to be able to exchange a commercial plaza for a log home up in Maine. It just won't work out that way. Okay? The next rule and regulation are called reinvestment requirements. So, hey, Ryan, Glenn, Terry, thank you so much for joining us. So to fully defer taxes on the sale of the original property, remember, we're talking about deferring taxes. You're not avoiding taxes, you're deferring them. The investor must reinvest all of the proceeds, all of them, from the sale into the replacement property. If the investor does not reinvest all the proceeds, they will owe taxes on the portion of the proceeds that were not invested. So it has to be done the right way. Hey, Liz, Gail, Donna, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We're going through the rules and regulations right now for 1031 exchange. Use requirement. The investor must intend to use the replacement property for investment or business purposes. And thank you so much for your likes. Investment or business purposes. This cannot be for residential properties. It cannot be used for personal use. It cannot be a second home. I'm sorry, it's not my fault. I didn't make the laws, right? Or it can't be for or a vacation property. Once again, they have to use it for investment or business purposes. All right. So earlier in this video, I discussed and mentioned a qualified intermediary. So what is a qualified intermediary? I never heard that before, Rob. So the investor must use a qualified intermediary to facilitate the exchange. This is a person, this qualified intermediary, they hold the proceeds from the sale of the original property and uses them to purchase the replacement property. And so we have a list of 2 or 3, really I think I have 3, of qualified intermediaries that this is something they do on a regular basis. Right? So if you need help, you're not sure who to go to, you just give me a call, reach out to me, let me know, and I will get you in touch with someone that I believe you can trust. Hey, Dream Crusher, Tractor Boy, Total Wellness, Mimi, appreciate you joining us. Right now we're going through the rules and regulations of 1031 exchanges for real estate. Let's talk about the title requirement. So the investor must take title to the replacement property in the same name as the original property was titled. So if the original property was titled in the name of Bananas LLC, the replacement property must also be titled in the name of Bananas LLC. You can't start a new business. You can't start a new LLC. You can't put it in someone else's name, because remember, this is all about taxes, and this is about you deferring taxes to pay possibly at a later date. And so there's a lot of rules and regulations that go along with that. There's strict guidelines. There's like-kind property requirements. There's reinvestment requirements. There's user requirements, the way that you use it, not for business, not for personal. There's qualified intermediary requirements. And so in order to do it the right way, all these things have to be followed. Okay? Now let's talk a little bit about someone who's looking for a replacement property, and basically a suitable property that's within the deadline. Because if you don't within the deadline, it could result in the invalidation of the 1031 exchange and imposition of capital gains taxes. Hey Marsh, thank you so much for joining us. User 5392, I appreciate you. So we're going to, number 1, work with that qualified intermediary that I mentioned. That person specializes in 1031 exchanges. So me as a real estate agent, I really do specialize helping people in real estate investments, multifamilies, commercial, mixed use, and that sort of thing. But these qualified intermediaries, they are the ones that know all the requirements of the IRS. That's what you would be paying them for, right? They have the resources. They understand how they can identify issues, deadlines, making sure they're on top of everything. And then me, I am a resource that I can help investors identify potential replacement properties. I have real estate listing websites available to me. I have databases available to me, and I'm able to help you sell the property. And once again, I have a nationwide network that I can help you do this with, right? And I also have a network of other professionals that will have knowledge of how to do this, right? Meaning the qualified intermediary, meaning maybe a potential accountant, maybe an attorney, right? And we will also be able, and this is fun stuff, this is what I know a lot of you want to know about, and thank you so much for your likes, is that we will also be able to consider off-market properties. Oh man, for those real estate investors who are hearing this stuff, I know you're jumping in your seat, because these off-market properties are not publicly listed. right? And they're not widely known. So we are able to get greater opportunities for possible negotiating, potential value for you as the investor. And we talk about potential value, that usually means more money in your pocket. And I know that you're loving to hear the sound of that. And once again, thank you, David, Three Rivers, Brian, Ramirez, Upside Down, Total Wellness. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your likes. So while we're identifying these replacement properties, it is important to consider a lot of these factors. The potential for appreciation, the quality of the property, right? You don't want to get yourself into a heartache. You don't want to get yourself more work. The potential for rental income, right? The potential for rental income, like we said, has to be of like kind. Can you 1031 into a bigger property? Yes, you can, right? And that's usually a lot easier to do because you're going to have to or want to use all the money. Like for instance, Ken said, a 10 to 15 unit rental, definitely you could, right? Especially if it is, one's a 10 unit rental, one's a 15 unit rental. That's perfect. Something that might not work is, like I said, you want to sell your 10 unit rental and you want to buy a log home in Maine. That's not going to work, right? So there are a lot of different factors, and so that's why we need to basically have a team together for you to make sure that we are finding a suitable replacement property. Because when it comes down to it, we're trying to look out for you. We want to make sure that we don't run the risk that here we're trying to do a 1031 exchange, and those wonderful tax collectors in Washington, D.C. say, you know what? That was not, and I've never had this happen to me before. Can you 1031 a property that you purchased, that you purchased on contract? Well, remember, this has to be done deliberately, and there are timelines involved. So you usually have to find that suitable replacement property really darn pretty quick, right? And the 45-day identification period, this is challenging, especially because the market is competitive, right? The IRS, they have very, very strict rules and regulations governing these 1031 exchanges. So we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. If you don't comply with the right rules, like for instance, the exchange is invalid, right? Or there's the like kind property requirements are not being taken care of correctly. So Total Wellness, can you explain the 45-day thing that you just mentioned? All right. So once again, when you put your property on the market that you're going to sell. And so remember, before we put your property on the market, we're going to talk about 1031 exchange. And I mentioned this to quite a few real estate investors. And they say, yes, I do potentially want to sell this property and buy another like kind property that I can defer the taxes with. So then we get involved with a 1031 exchange intermediary, right? We put your property on the market, and the 45-day identification period starts, where that is when you have the time to identify another property. So like for instance, we get the whole 1031 exchange plan going, we meet with the intermediary, we make sure that you understand all the rules, the regulations. We put your property, not your home, we put your multifamily or your plaza or your warehouse on the market, and then boom, we get on the search. And the way that I've done this most of the time, the way that I've been involved is, for example, I've had so real estate investors, in my opinion, most of them, they realize, you know what? You can't ignore a property. Okay? A property needs the human touch, right? Even if you're not doing it, you as the investor, the owner, need to be able to see the property, or someone who representing you needs to be able to take care of the snow, needs to make sure the electrical is taken care of, property is maintained well, maybe taking care of the rentals. So for example, I had this gentleman that he owned a 4-unit plaza here in central Connecticut, Hartford specifically, and he wanted to move down to Florida. And he was like, Rob, I just can't deal with it anymore. He says, but he goes, I do want to move to Florida. I can't deal with the weather anymore. I want to move to Florida, and I wouldn't mind buying another property almost like this in Florida. I said, well, why don't you do that then? And what we can do is we can get you involved with a 1031 exchange where the taxes can be deferred. Okay, so we met up with the intermediary. We went over the rules and regulations. He signed the appropriate documents to get things started for the 1031. We put his 4-unit plaza on the market, and then I interviewed specifically a couple of commercial brokers for him down in Florida, put them in touch together, and they started looking for little plazas down in Florida. And what he ended up buying was something around the same price range. And it was actually, I think it was like 4 or 5 commercial and 2 residential units. Okay, and he was he was so happy, he was beyond himself, because what actually happened is back in like 1983, he bought this property for like $160,000. Then when he sold it for like $860,000. So that would be a $700,000 capital gains, right? $860,000 is what he sold it for, and thank you so much, Ken, for your likes. Let's say $60,000 is what he bought it for. So let's say that's a $700,000 capital gains. Does everyone follow that? And if you don't, just let me know and I'll go over it again. So let's just say he was making $700,000 for capital gains. Okay, the difference between what he bought it for versus what he sold it for. Well, a lot of times, depending on what your tax bracket is, that $700,000, he might have had to pay like $200,000 of taxes. Instead, he was able to move down to Florida. He didn't have to worry about keep coming back to Hartford area. And he found himself another commercial building, and he didn't have to pay any capital gains taxes. They were all deferred. Now, who knows what's going to happen in the future? But for now, while this 80-something-year-old man is living, he made a lot of money, and he was able to invest it in another property and get cash flow down there. And every morning he wakes up, he goes and walks around the building, makes sure everything's looking good down in Florida, and then he goes to the beach. How cool is that? Okay. Now remember, so we talked about complying with the IRS rules and regulations. Just like with any investment, there's a risk. There's market fluctuations, right? We don't know what's going to happen with that replacement property. We're not exactly sure, what's going to happen in the future. We do know, like we talked about, is that if you want to get out of the real estate investor business, this is probably not the thing for you, because you're still going to need to manage a property and take care of it. But depending on what you are able to do, depending on who you're able to hire, right? You might still need to find reliable tenants depending on the type of building. You might still need to handle maintenance and repairs, or have somebody do it for you and navigate some new, right? This might be a little bit different for you. Some new local regulations that you're not used to. So you have to be on point to be able to understand that. So if we kind of think about it, the 1031 exchange, there are definitely a lot of benefits, but you also have to consider the risks and the challenges associated with the process. Now, when I told you about this gentleman, Carmine, who had the 4 unit and moved down to Florida, I mean, for him, everything worked out great, and he absolutely loved it. Right? He loved the way that the whole thing worked out. But sometimes it can get a little bit tricky, right? So, you have to make sure you're identifying within those 45 days a suitable replacement property. You have to make sure that you can secure financing. So, again, I help with credit restoration. If that's something that needs to be done, you let me know. But when it comes to like credit restoration, sometimes or securing financing, we have to get you in touch with a commercial financier. And sometimes that's a little bit harder these days, right? Because I can tell you, it seems like maybe the lenders or the banks are a little bit more strict with what's going on. Now, there's all kinds of IRS rules and regulations that have to be taken care of, and that's why we handle this before we even get started on things. Before we even put the new home or the new property, the new commercial property on the market. Okay? You're looking at managing market risk because you're not sure what's going to happen in the future, especially if you don't know about a market that you're not familiar with, a new local market. And property management has to be taken care of. But when you're working with experienced professionals and you're conducting your due diligence, right, you can help to mitigate these risks. And that's what I do, because I really want you to have a successful exchange. Right? I want to help you select and we do a hand select of the best properties. We strategically will make sure that we're selling your property for the most money possible in the right time frame. And so sometimes, we have to make sure that we have a buyer of the property that we're going to do, the original property we're going to do the 1031 exchange with. We have to make sure that they're flexible as well, that they are able to maybe put things on hold a little bit if we haven't found that replacement property right away. Now, remember, if we usually only have those 45 days to do it, and it's not impossible, but sometimes it could be a little bit hard to do. So the timing is very important. So if you're interested in 1031 exchanges, Good Vibes, Sue, Richard, Rocky, please let me know. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. You can put them in the chat here. You can DM me. You can reach out to me. And we can talk about these. And again, I help people nationwide be able to get in touch with the right people as far as selling the original property, getting the financing for a new property, talking with the right intermediary to make sure that this is done correctly, and making sure that we can find the correct or the best replacement property for you. Okay, so that's really everything I have for you today. I appreciate you listening. I hope you're having the start of a wonderful, beautiful holiday season. God bless you. This is Rob Rosa. Hopefully your favorite real estate broker. Signing out, my friends, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.